Welcome to case study number 2. This is Rustler, who is a quarter horse. Rustler's not yet mature at only 6 years of age. Rustler's owner had some concerns about his hoof balance, in particular his dorsal palmar and his plantar P3 angles. There was a period of his life where he was trimmed to a forced ground parallel palmar and plantar P3 angle, and the owner was concerned that this might have affected him and what influence this might have on his posture and his development, as she's looking to begin preparation for riding. She was visited by vet physio Yasmin Stewart, and Yasmin thought that maybe his hoof balance could be better, and she referred Rustler and Rustler's owner to us to see if we could support him. We first trimmed him on the 3rd of November, and then the second visit was on the 8th of December, and it's these photographs that we're going to discuss. Rustler's owner has done some self-study in trimming before, so she's done a great job of trimming him between consultations. There was radical changes in his hoof morphology and improvements in his posture and his balance, and Rustler is overall happier to be trimmed. And in discussions with Rustler's owner, we think that maybe there is some improved emotional and neurological regulation. And all team members involved agree that Rustler can now commence postural rehabilitation therapy in hand. We feel that this case study highlights the need to evidence changes, which can really help in aiding communication between team members. And I'm going to show you something very special in this case study regarding an adjustment to the trim that I made, where the process of taking the photographs highlighted an issue. And I'm going to talk about the phenomenon called parallax and how we need to be aware of this when we're documenting and trimming horses. So here are the post-trim photographs and where I could optimize the balance on the first trim in November. His hoof pastern axis actually isn't too bad. However, the rest of the parameters would indicate that there isn't ideal phalangeal alignment. And this is where an assessment externally can give a slightly skewed impression of what might be happening on the inside, particularly with quite short pastern horses, such as quarter horses. And if you wanted to know more accurately, you could take balance radiographs and view them internally as well as externally. There is quite a high coronet band angle, and this, together with the other proportions and parameters, indicate that there isn't phalangeal alignment. And I think, so far with my understanding of quarter horses and working with them over the years, that they have quite large, deep and concave pedal bones. And this, coupled with a relatively short pastern conformation and an upright pastern, I think gives rise to the need for quite an upright hoof. So they really need an adequate sole depth, and Rustler had this in the front or the cranial portion of the hoof, but he lacked this in the back of the hoof. And as you can see, there are unhealthy base proportions with a long toe and a low underrun heel, and there were some minor wall distortions. There wasn't a great connection between the wall and the sole underneath. The heel and the dorsal wall are not within 5 degrees, and this has given rise, again with the other parameters, to a long lever arm, which does place an increased strain on the flexor tendons. And if we consider the environment in which he lives, he's a field-kept horse in the UK, so there's going to be some mud at some point in time through the winter, and there might even be snow and ice. So without alternative arrangements or footing, and perhaps the inappropriateness of using boots 24/7, I had to really consider how much I could trim off these hooves in order to keep him feeling comfortable and safe. And I think as well this case study highlights the need to assess, again, accurately and objectively, and understand what the parameters mean when we hoof map to help guide us towards an intervention. I think it's fair to say that most hoof care professionals might view this hoof as having a high, long toe, and that removing some height at the toe would definitely improve the parameters. And while I agree with this, I think it could place the horse at risk of being footsore, particularly in the environment in which he's living. So we really must consider the whole horse and how the horse might respond to the ever-changing environment in how we approach hoof care integratively. So here we're going to do a deep dive into Rustler's left fore. There we have the mild broken back hoof pastern axis with potentially a hyperdorsiflexed pastern. I'm not quite sure, but I believe that Rustler would benefit from a slightly higher pastern angle. And we can see on the second photograph, the middle one, in December, just a few weeks later, that it is indeed slightly higher. There is slightly higher than I would like to see coronet band angle initially at 25 degrees, and very poor base proportions. There's that long toe, so 71 to 29. And there's the high toe illustrated in the heel to toe ratio of 100 to 242. And that again is highlighting the lack of appropriate vertical depth in the caudal foot. And that relates also to the palmar angle. There's a poor toe to heel angle, 43 to 57, so they're not within 5 degrees. And what I would consider a mildly concerning dorsal wall coronet band angle, again highlighting the distortion in that coronet band angle and in the caudal foot. And then if we move on to December 2023, we can see again a broken back hoof pastern axis, but I believe that there is improved alignment, and radiographs could obviously highlight these as facts. There is a healthier coronet band angle of 22 and an improved base proportion of 68 to 32. As he's developed caudal foot, we now have much improved heel to toe ratio of 100 to 210. So rather than taking height at the toe to improve those parameters, I've actually decided to wait and facilitate the rehabilitation of that caudal foot through the trim by supporting the longitudinal flexibility of the capsule. And there we can see that the toe and heel angle have improved from 47 to 58. So those are getting closer to being within 5 degrees of each other. The heel is still underrun, but it's definitely moving backwards, and you can see that there is more depth as that heel is pushing up and the caudal foot is developing. So the hoof score improved from around a 3 out of 10 initially in November to 4 out of 10, and he could, in theory, commence in-hand postural rehabilitation exercise. If we fast forward to perhaps December 2024, 12 months later, we have what I imagine could be an ideal hoof morphology for this individual horse and his conformation and breed tendencies. And we'll not actually know for sure until we get there, but based on what I understand from seeing radiographs and studying externally the morphology of both the hoof and the posture of quarter horses, I believe they need quite an upright capsule. And there we can see a hoof pastern axis of 65 degrees, a coronet band angle of 16, healthy base proportions within the 60-40 parameters, a healthy heel to toe ratio of 100 to 154, so almost 1 to 1.5, a healthy toe to heel angle of 64-65, and a dorsal wall coronet band angle within what could be described as healthy parameters. But remember, that hasn't yet been more clearly observed and defined within modern podiatry and farriery sciences. And the hoof score for this hoof is definitely over 5.5. I've even stretched the parameter to say, hey, who knows? Maybe this hoof is capable of a high level intensity and duration under saddle barefoot. Here we can see the left hind. This is again broken back, not too much broken back. You can see it's in orange and not red. Red being the most alarming parameter, or the least healthy parameter. There is poor alignment, and this again is highlighted by looking at all of the parameters. So a slightly too high coronet band angle of 25 degrees, unhealthy base proportions of 65-35, a poor heel to toe ratio of 100 to 253, which again highlights, I believe, a lack of appropriate depth for this particular breed and individual horse. A poor toe to heel angle of 47 and 55, so they're not within 5 degrees, and a slightly unhealthy dorsal wall coronet band angle of 114. And I've suggested, based on just this one hoof assessment, that we could score this around a 3 out of 10. If we fast forward a month later to December, we can see a straight hoof pastern axis of around 58-58. That's promising. But does the pastern need to be higher? I can see some evidence above the coronet hairline of a lack of depth of the bony column within the capsule. And I since found out that Rustler had had some vaccinations within quite a short period of time. And that can affect the suspension of the inner foot within the capsule and might explain what I'm observing there. So perhaps the alignment's not as good as even these parameters indicate. There is a healthier coronet band angle of 21, ideal base proportions of 60-40, although I would prefer to see them slightly less in a barefoot horse. There is improved heel to toe ratio of 100 to 221, again indicating the improvement in the depth in the caudal foot. An ideal toe to heel angle of 57 and 58. And a slightly unhealthy dorsal wall coronet band angle, again indicating that there is some development to do still in the caudal foot. And I've indicated a hoof and body score for this individual hoof for around 4 out of 10. So certainly he could be doing in-hand postural rehabilitation exercise and could even be sat on really lightly under saddle, just again based on this hoof assessment. If we fast forward to 12 months on, we can see a straight hoof pastern axis of around 62 degrees, which I feel could be ideal for this breed and individual horse. Coronet band angle of 16 degrees, healthier base proportions within 60-40, healthy heel to toe ratio of 100 and 163, and a healthy toe to heel angle of around 58-62, so within 5 degrees. And a much healthier dorsal wall coronet band angle of around 102. And again, the hoof score really is the sky's the limit for a hoof of this shape. But again, we need to consider the whole horse in determining a hoof score. So here's where I took some photographs and realised that I hadn't actually addressed a very small amount of medial lateral imbalance at the pillars in the cranial portion of the hoof. And I noticed this by taking a photograph from the underside of the hoof. I could see that there was a slightly higher lateral toe pillar. And when I took a photograph from this aspect, I could see something wasn't quite right. Again, there's a slight discord between the tubules. They weren't quite 90 degrees. And also the coronet band angle wasn't quite zero. So I thought, even without a markup, I could see this visually, that something wasn't quite right. And the photograph on the right shows the same hoof taken within moments of making a really small adjustment. You're talking 1 or 2 light swipes of a rasp with one hand. I then readjusted the wool trim. So in effect, I did alter all of the planes, the dorsal proximal, medial lateral and the dorsal palmar planes, just by this really small adjustment. And I want to make you aware of something called parallax. Parallax is a displacement or a difference in the apparent position of an object viewed along 2 different lines of sight. And this is according to Wikipedia. So I'd like you to do a fun exercise. Create a circle with your finger and close one eye. Place this in front of you. Look through the circle to an object in the distance. And I want you to close one eye and focus on the object. Without moving your hand, switch eyes and see what happens. Typically, what happens is the item you were previously viewing moves out of the circle. And you'll tend to find that your stronger, more dominant eye, when viewed through this eye, will keep the item in the middle of the circle. For me, it's my right eye, but for you, it could be your left. And we need to be aware of this when we're assessing hooves, because there will be a bias towards our stronger eye, and we might not see what we think is the truth. This is one of the reasons why I love to document, because the camera doesn't lie. And these photographs just really excite me. So here are the markups just before and just after the medial lateral adjustment. Every single parameter, bar the dorsal wall coronet band angle and the dorsal wall angle, has changed. But if you look closely, you can see a big change in the heel angle and the placement of the heel in relation to the bony column of the horse. We even have improved base proportions, and we have improved relationship between the height of the heel and the height of the dorsal wall. And here I've zoomed in so you can see the difference in the heel from 47 degrees to 58. That's an 11-degree difference. And remember, I didn't trim anything in the back of the hoof. It was just the toe pillar on the lateral side. The caudal hoof is incredibly dynamic, and the position and orientation of the bony column greatly influences the caudal hoof, as well as the fascial chain, which goes all the way from the heel to the hind foot, all the way across the top of the horse to the poll. And this is why we should trim horses and not hooves. And this is why we should document and map often.